We are delighted that you could join us this evening for the debut performance of Song of the Prophets, a requiem for the climate. Tonight, you're going to be part of something very special, an evening that uses beautiful music, gifted musicians, and passionate people to draw all of our attention towards the biggest crisis facing our world today, and that is the climate crisis. Christian Aid has been campaigning on the devastating effects of climate change for the world's poorest people for over a decade. Throughout this year, we continue to campaign on climate justice, and our climate justice campaign is drawing attention to the urgent action needed on the global issue. The climate crisis is making life really difficult for some of the world's most poorest people and marginalized communities. It is having a devastating impact on every area of life, from basic needs, such as food and shelter, to issues such as education and women's rights, water scarcity. The pervasive impact on everyone, and particularly those in the communities in which we work, means we can no longer ignore it. We can no longer remain silent. We must speak up. I recall visiting women in Ethiopia in 2019, communities of women who are already living the realities of the climate crisis. They told me about how it is impacting on them. They say to me, "We understand that this is all caused by climate change. The frequent droughts, the intense floods, the fact that we don't have our livestock because they're dying, we don't have food because the crops cannot grow. But we didn't contribute anything to this. And yet we have to find ways of survival." As we mark over 75 years of Christian Aid, we are celebrating all that has been achieved by the organization and its supporters over the decades. From working on civil rights in the US, to anti-apartheid in South Africa, to the HIV/AIDS crisis, tax justice, and now in our coronavirus response in some of the poorest communities around the world. But we know that the climate emergency will still be with us long after the coronavirus pandemic has ended. It is time for urgent action. We call on political leaders, on the churches, and faith-based institutions. Indeed, we call on each and every single one of us, and people like you, to rally together to bring about the change that is so desperately needed. We hope you enjoy Song of the Prophets, but most of all, we hope that you will be moved by what you hear, thinking of our brothers and sisters around the world, and resolving to take action for their sake. Because it's only together that we can stop the climate crisis, one of the greatest injustices of our times.
When we were approached by Christian Aid in April 2019 to take part in this project, we were absolutely delighted. We know that climate change is the biggest issue facing the world today, and we were drawn to the organisation's vision to the injustices faced by people in the developing world today. Music is able to convey important messages that humanity has to hear, so we were thrilled to take part in this. Christian Aid's vision of dignity, equality and justice for all living in extreme poverty around the world, no matter what their faith, is an inspiring one. As someone of Nigerian and Irish descent, I recognise the stark inequalities that exist between the richest and the poorest globally, and wanted to try and do my bit to help. We were excited by Christian Aid's creativity and vision to rally people together to stop climate crisis. I founded Chineke to provide career opportunities for young, black and ethnically diverse classical musicians in the UK and Europe. Our mission is championing change and celebrating diversity in classical music. We've had the privilege of performing all over the world in some of the most famous venues, including Wigmore Hall, the Royal Albert Hall, our home at South Bank Centre, and of course here in the magnificent St. Paul's Cathedral. My aim in starting Chineke was to create a space where black and ethnically diverse musicians can walk on stage and know that they belong in every sense of the word. If even one child feels that their colour is getting in the way of their musical ambitions, then I hope to inspire them and give them a platform and show them that music, of whatever kind, is for all people. We hope that you'll be inspired by Song of the Prophets and be moved to take action on climate change.
Madinya ngoma umusuna nyaradimu. Madinya ngoma umusuna nyaradimu. Ya tino ber, jumadi gom umusuna nyaradimu. Kusur jumadi nyangome umusuna nyaradimu. Atieno ber, Jumadhi gumbi. Mbaka gino chak chon, kwara podingi ma. Mbaka gino chak chon, kadimu mbaka gino chak chon to kwara podingi ma.
So as I am doing this talk today, it's the second day we don't have water in my area. And we usually have water from around 4 a.m. until about 10 to 11 a.m. Sometimes we just don't have water at all, like today and yesterday. Imagine young people that have to go to school in an area where there's no water. Imagine young people going to school and that school does not have water. Imagine young people being at school and the temperatures, the heat can reach from about 30 to 35 degrees Celsius and sometimes 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, because it happens in some places here in South Africa. There's a study which was conducted in South Africa in 2019, which found that learners who are in rural areas and in areas where they are not well equipped schooling facilities are less compatible in securing university spaces and in getting jobs than the learners who are not in rural areas, who are in urban areas and are attending schools in well-equipped facilities, like facilities that have, for instance, air conditioners and other equipment. And now what this does is that this situation is creating another issue, which is inequalities in our society. And I think this is the challenge that I would like to present to you. That climate change causes one issue, and that issue causes another issue. And another issue, it just worsens another issue that we live with in many of our communities. So if we think about tackling climate justice as a matter of intergenerational justice, we have to think about today, but most importantly, we have to think about young people and the future, because young people are the future of our society. And young people can be the instrument of what we want to see in the future. Young people can play a very significant role in creating a better society. Climate justice is a matter of intergenerational justice. It is a matter of creating a better future. Thank you.
I would like to recognize our indigenous peoples who have been sustaining and defending balance in our ecosystems. We owe many things from them and we ask for forgiveness for the abuses we made and we commit to work together for the defense of our planet and all human rights. In the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan speaks to us of climate inaction, injustice, apathy, and irresponsibility. This is the price of carbon. But we are confused. Why are we the ones paying almost every year? We continue to seek climate justice, and climate debt must be settled. And we need to sound the alarm for climate emergency. In what ways? A change of mindset, of lifestyle, and a much needed urgent action. Yes, a change of mindset. We are facing this ecological crisis, greater than mining, greater than unsustainable infrastructure, greater than climate change. This is an existential crisis, an identity crisis which we forcefully separate ourselves from where we come from. That it is as if we own everything. Yes, the root of all these turmoils is greed. Profit for the sake of the few, sacrificing the integrity of our fragile ecosystems. But with the same zeal and vigor, we continue to stand in front of the many corporations and financial institutions, their board and shareholders, their CEOs, to urge them not to finance this crisis. But can people be more proactive? Leveling up, we need to look at how we spend our money. Is it for needs or is it for wants? Where do you invest your money? What kind of industry? Will it harm the earth or make it better? Would it pollute the air you breathe? Would it poison the food you eat? Would it harm the lives of your children and your children's children in the years to come? The norm is balance. The new norm is sustainability. We need to learn from the wrongs of the past to address our needs at the present while not compromising the capacity of the next generation to survive. Sustainability is the new revolution. Let's stop patronizing products and services harming our planet. Let us put more efforts in genuine nature-based solutions. Let's invest more in the care of our common home. Restore, regenerate with dignity, equality, justice, and love. We may be living in small islands with those giant waves eating our lands and the strong winds destroying our abodes, dividing us. But truly we say, let the seas that surround us and that breeze we are breathing in, the calmness of ripples reaching our shores and silent whispers of the wind unite us all.
Hi, my name is Rachel and I'm 23. I live in Sheffield and I'm part of a team of young people in the UK this year who are organising a relay to COP26. And I just wanted to say one thing really in this time that I have with you this evening. And the question I want to ask you is the love of God enough? One of the things I come back to is something that's been said by the United Nations Environment Programme. They say that to be in line with the pathways of the Paris Agreement, the levels of ambition that we have at present need to increase by at least threefold to be in line with the 2 degrees pathway, and by fivefold to be in line with 1.5 degrees. The level of change that is needed is huge. I find it scary and I find it humbling. And in the midst of it all, I hold more closely to the love of our God, which sustains and enriches and animates life and brings life. When I was growing up as a child, I would hear the part of scripture that says you cannot serve both God and money. And I would think that that was a bit of a strange thing for scripture to say. I was like, oh, well, of course they need to say it, but obviously we don't, money is just, obviously secondary to God. And yet I actually see the way that our love of money corrupts and changes the love in our hearts. one of the particular examples that I've seen in my own life is I went to the AGM of an oil company a couple of years ago in London, and I was there to ask a question about communities in Kenya who'd been affected by oil extraction. And I was just struck by how bizarre it is that in the world that we have, there are companies who have their headquarters in the UK who are taking account of profits that they have made from the destruction of communities thousands of miles away. And how strange it is that we live in a world where capital has greater freedom of movement than people do. And yet, there are so many things that really tie us to the status quo as we know it now, and we really struggle to move out of that. And we look at the decades ahead and we want easy answers and there aren't any. And we fear what we will lose, what that means for our power and our convenience and the lives that we've built for ourselves. And so I just want to ask again, is the love of God enough? Is the grace of God sufficient? Is it enough for us to loosen our grip to the things that we feel so strongly about, which give us our comfort and our convenience? And this question is also a prayer. It's a prayer that the love of God would be enough for us, that it would be enough for us individually, and it would be enough for our churches, that it would enliven us and give us courage and strength that we need. And it's a prayer for the future as we will live it. That we would live out a world in which the love of God is enough.
Sometimes children fantasize that they aren't really the offspring of their parents. They come from somewhere else, from famous or rich or royal families. They cope with an inner anxiety about not belonging, not fitting in, by making up a story about being from somewhere else. And perhaps this is harmless enough in the life of an individual who needs to contain their worries and their loneliness for a while. But not so harmless if it becomes a habit for life. So is this what the human race has been up to for the last few centuries? Perhaps the last few millennia? Being human is being aware of strange things like language and art and self-awareness that seem to set us apart from nature, from the rest of the world of material stuff. And so we tell ourselves that we don't really belong here, that our dependence on the stuff around us and our need to come to terms with its rhythms and limits is something we ought to get over and leave behind. We know that we are free in a unique way, but we lock ourselves more firmly in prison by imagining that our freedom must mean being completely independent and completely in charge of where we are and who and what we're living with. It leads to human interactions that try to make some people more free by making slaves of others. It leads to interactions with the world around that pillage and ruin that world to show how powerful we are. But sooner or later, fantasies catch up with you. Trying to live in an unreal world takes away more and more of your real freedom. It leaves you in a smaller and smaller space. Contrast this with the words of the writer of the 8th Psalm. When I look at the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast established, what are human beings that thou art mindful of them? The vast beauty of the material universe prompts us to amazement at the grace of a God who has given us the freedom not to control, but to wonder, not to exploit, but to give thanks. If we are in some sense given dominion over other creatures, it's in the context of our smallness and vulnerability. Fragile as we are, we have the power to make sense of the world we live in and to map its workings. But this is impossible without the freedom to see the truth of ourselves and the freedom to see the wildness and overflowing of life in the furthest reaches of the skies. It's grounded in the freedom to look on the world as God looks at it. Remember how in the book of Proverbs, the writer imagines God's everlasting wisdom rejoicing in the world inhabited by human beings. God sees the goodness of what has been made. God is glad to see the divine beauty and abundance reflected in the world. God invites us humans to make use of our distinctive gifts of language and art and self-awareness to deepen our own joy and thanksgiving, not to tell ourselves fables of how distant we are from all this and how we have the right to cut off all our life-giving connections with this intricate and beautiful system of close-woven exchange of life and action and promise. Fantasy catches up with us. Today we have no excuse for not seeing the damage we have done by our untruthfulness. And it's not only damage to the common world we share. For us, in the prosperous and mostly white world, it is the ongoing damage to the liberty of others less able to protect themselves. The ongoing enslavement of others who have been left unprotected against environmental crisis because they have been used, dominated, and abandoned by a culture of manic acquisition and an idolatry of growth for its own sake. For quite a long time, we've been able to imagine that all this is someone else's problem. But as crisis moves towards catastrophe, we can't pretend. We and our children and grandchildren are not protected or exempted. The question is knocking on our door today. In Christian Aid, we work not only to bring closer an end to poverty and a more just world order, but to remind ourselves and our society about the fantasies and illusions that have brought into being this world in which a minority of humans can put at risk the well-being, the survival of the whole human family. And this means telling the truth about the crisis of our environment, not as a little extra good cause, a PS to the main message about poverty and injustice, but as an intrinsic part of understanding how poverty and injustice work today. We know from the first-hand testimony of those we work with, in the Philippines, in East Africa, in Bangladesh, how many new challenges, how many new kinds of precariousness are being created by climate change. We are bound to declare this as a judgment on a sad, greedy, destructive history, as a warning that this crisis does not stop at geographical and political boundaries. But prophets don't just declare judgment and warning. They speak in the name of a God who continues to delight in the world that divine love and generosity have made. And that continuing delight is what brings divine wisdom into the world in the flesh and blood of Jesus of Nazareth. He declares the unwelcome truth that our mutual hostilities will kill us, that our addiction to possession and control will kill us, that our passionate longing to be in the right at the expense of others will kill us. And he declares that God does not want us to die. So that we shall not die, Jesus surrenders his life, and more than that, hands over his life, his breath, his spirit to us, so that the entire creation will be made free as God's children are made free. Christians are summoned to receive and to give this life in worship and in service. And today, more clearly than ever, this means understanding that we are summoned to delight in our created material home and to serve its integrity and health as an inseparable part of serving one another and serving our Maker and Redeemer. So many people still associate Christian Aid with the slogan, "We believe in life before death." We have tried over 75 years to witness to that belief and that life by doing all we can to learn from the powerless and forgotten what it is that they have to give to those of us who cling to the myth of our own power and reputation. Today we have to learn also from the material world we share, a world we treat as passive raw material for our use, but which is shot through with beauty and intelligence and powers of renewal, shot through with divine wisdom. As we tell the true story of our world, made in grace and goodness, wrecked by greed, mended by mutual love and life-sharing, transfigured by Christ's Spirit, we are stirred again into action and witness, testifying to the God who does not want us to die, but to live abundantly. We're not cuckoos in the nest of the world, disguised royalty in a worker's cottage, alien spirits in the middle of an embarrassing physical environment. We are as truly children of this family of creation, as we are, by adoption and grace, children of the heavenly love that makes us and remakes us in the image of Christ. Here is the truth that will set us free, the truth of our solidarity with all God has made, with God's human children, and with all the diverse reflections of divine glory and harmony in the world we inhabit. God saw that it was good, and God called Eve and Adam to care for and nurture this goodness. God calls us now to the same task, and day by day renews our hope, even as God renews our somber recognition of the damage we have done and still do. The truth will set us free. The fantasy will hurt and diminish and destroy us and our whole world. God help us to live in the truth and to be agents of liberty.
There are so many people that I would like to thank this evening. So many people who made this possible. I want to thank St. Paul's Cathedral for hosting us, the composers for writing such powerful music, Chineke for performing and working so closely with us on this project, to the instrumentalists for bringing the song of the prophets to life. I would like to thank Rowan, Christian Aid's chair, for the powerful address. Join me also in thanking so many of the staff team at Christian Aid who have worked tirelessly over the past 2 years to make this happen. I'm enormously grateful to them. I am very grateful to Chine MacDonald, who has been leading the team to do this. And finally, I would like to thank you all so much for being here with us, for standing in solidarity with our brothers and sisters around the world. We know at Christian Aid that without you, we would not be able to do this. We can't do it by ourselves. We need to stand together with you. And so my gratitude and thanks to all of you. This is a key year for the United Kingdom. We need to call our leaders to take action on climate change. From the G7 to COP, we will be highlighting the importance of calling for climate justice with the prophetic voices of those of our brothers and sisters from the Global South. I hope that you will join us in calling for much needed change, and I hope that you're going to continue to walk with us in solidarity. Thank you and good night.